Harper hadn't said a word in 13 hours. Not on the ride to the airport, not at the gate, not even when the woman at security offered her a lollipop with a smile. She just held her father's hand and looked down. Elliot Granger noticed, but didn't speak on it. He wasn't good with soft things. Not anymore boarding. Had started early Tokyo to San Francisco first-class seat 2A and 2B. Enough room for silence to stretch out and stay a while. By the time they reached cruising altitude, Elliot had opened his laptop for the third time. Emails, performance charts, a pending acquisition, everything he could control lived on that screen. Everything. He couldn't sat beside him. Harper, 5 years old. Legs tucked under her like she was trying to disappear into the seat. Her stuffed bunny clutched against her chest. A pink plastic fork untouched on the tray table in front of her. She hadn't eaten again. Elliot closed the screen slowly. He didn't sigh, didn't frown, but something in his shoulders dropped just a little, like defeat was a weight. He was learning to carry in silence. Then she appeared. "Would your daughter like some juice?" The voice came warm, steady, professional, but kind. He looked up. Alina Torres, flight attendant 28. Moved with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times, and the softness of someone who still cared enough to do it well. "We're fine." Elliot's polite but firm words were lost on Alina, whose attention was fixed on the young girl. Crouching to Harper's eye level, Alina offered, "I brought apple juice with a tiger on it. The tiger's a little bossy, but he's good company." When Harper remained unresponsive, Alina gently placed the juice on the tray. Without a word, she opened the meal's foil lid, pulled a napkin from her pocket, and reached for the small fork. "She hasn't been eating," Elliot confessed, his voice almost a whisper of shame. Alina didn't look up, simply stating, "It's not you. It's not about me." She meticulously cut the pasta into smaller pieces, balancing a small amount on the sideways fork. Then, meeting Harper's gaze, she said, "You don't have to eat, but if you're hungry, it's okay to let someone help." Harper didn't move, but a moment later, her fingers twitched. And then, without a word, she leaned forward and opened her mouth. The fork went in a bite, a slow chew, a swallow. That was it. But for Elliot Granger, who had watched his daughter retreat further and further into silence since the day her mother died, it was everything. She took a second bite, then a third. Elliot's throat tightened. Alina didn't say anything. She just placed the fork down and wiped Harper's chin gently with a napkin. Then soft, almost like a secret. Harper whispered one word, "Angel." Alina blinked. She smiled. "Not big, not performative, just real close," she said. "But I'm just the one who listens." Elliot stared at her for 5 years. He had built walls around himself, around Harper, around every room they walked into. And in less than 2 minutes, this woman, this stranger, had stepped over every one of them without asking for permission. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. So instead he just said, "Thank you." Alina stood, nodded once, and moved back toward the galley. She didn't look back. But Elliot watched her go, watched the way Harper's eyes followed her, and for the first time in years, he felt the altitude hit different, like maybe something had just shifted, not in the sky but inside him. By the time the plane landed, Harper was asleep. Her cheek rested against Elliot's arm. Her breath, soft and steady, her stuffed bunny laid, tucked under her jacket like it was guarding something delicate. Elliot didn't move. He watched her sleep and thought about how rare this was. Peace, not just the kind that came with altitude, but the kind that settled into the lines of a child's face. When she felt safe, he'd forgotten what that looked like. The passengers around them began to stir zippers, coats, polite, small talk. Somewhere near the front, a baby cried. A businessman argued with someone over a Bluetooth headset. It all sounded far away. Alina stood near the exit, giving instructions with calm professionalism. The other attendants moved quickly around her, but her eyes scanned the cabin one last time and landed briefly on Harper. Then she looked away at the gate. Elliot adjusted the strap of his carry-on and guided Harper forward, her small hand clasped in his. She walked quietly, still half asleep. They reached the terminal, and just before they turned toward customs, he stopped. "Wait here," he said softly to Harper. He turned back. Elena was walking toward the crew exit, her suitcase already rolling behind her. "Miss Torres." She glanced over her shoulder. "Mr. Granger, I meant what I said on the plane," he said. "I don't usually ask for help, but something about you worked." She nodded politely. "I'm glad your daughter ate." "That's not what I mean." He said you got through to her. Alina shifted her bag to the other hand. "Sometimes it's not about getting through, it's about showing up without expecting anything back." Elliot paused. "I'm staying in Tokyo for 2 weeks. I brought Harper with me because I thought a change of place might help. But I didn't plan on this. This you Ayalanos." Eyes flickered. "I'd like to hire you." He continued. "Just while we're here, Harper trusts you." "That's rare." She smiled faintly. "I'm not looking for a new job. I'm not offering one. I'm offering a moment, something temporary." "You wouldn't be a nanny, you'd just be around familiar." Alina studied him, the silence, stretching for a beat too long. "You don't even know me," she said. "I know you gave my daughter something no one else could." She exhaled the kind of breath people let go after holding it for years. "I have a return flight tonight. I'll cover it, and your time generously." Alina hesitated. Behind him, Harper stood still, watching, wide-eyed, clutching the sleeve of her father's coat. Alina looked down, then back up. 3 days, she said. "Finally, that's all." Elliot nodded. 3 days later, that evening, Tokyo, the hotel suite was spacious, minimal, expensive. The kind of place where everything looked untouched, too polished to feel like anyone belonged. Alina stepped inside and took in the view floor-to-ceiling windows, rain sliding gently down the glass, the soft glow of city lights beyond purple. Curled on the couch, clutching her bunny, Harper watched the television with the sound low. Elliot poured coffee and offered dinner, saying, "You don't have to stay long." Alina nodded, removed her jacket, and gently approached Harper. "Hi again," she said softly, crouching beside her. "I'm sorry I didn't get to say goodbye at the airport." Harper didn't speak, but reached for Alina's hand. That was all it took. Dinner was simple, and Alina helped Harper eat more than usual, though not everything. Elliot remained quiet for most of the meal, observing them like a man struggling to recall a forgotten language. Afterward, Alina helped Harper brush her teeth, tucked her into the smaller guest bed, and read half a storybook aloud before Harper drifted off. Elliot leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "She never lets people do that," he said quietly. "Stories touch, not sense." He stopped himself. Alina looked over her shoulder. "It's not about trust always. Sometimes it's just timing." Elliot didn't answer right away. She hasn't smiled like that in years. He said. Finally, Alina stood smooth the blanket. "Children don't forget joy. They just wait for someone safe enough to share it with again." A few minutes later in the hotel's lounge, the city lights shimmered behind them, neon blurred by soft rainfall. Elliot nursed his coffee while Alina stirred a cup of green tea. Neither of them rushed to speak. "Can I ask something?" she said at last. He nodded. "Why me?" He took a moment. "Because I've paid experts, therapists, behavioral specialists. None of them got anywhere near Harper." "And you think I did?" "I know you did." Alina looked out the window. Her reflection was faint, flickering in the glass, like a version of herself. She barely recognized. "I didn't do anything special." She said, "You didn't treat her like a case." A silence settled between them, soft but loaded. Then Elliot asked, "Why did you say yes?" Alina hesitated. Her voice was quieter now, because she looked at me like she was still trying. Later that night, Alina sat alone in her hotel room, watching the rain. She should have said no. She'd told herself not to get involved again, but when Harper looked at her on that plane, it wasn't something she could walk away from. Not again. Tokyo's morning rain had softened into a cold mist that blurred the skyline and made everything outside the hotel windows look like a watercolor painting left too long in the storm. Inside the suite was quiet. Alina stood in the kitchen area, tying her hair into a loose ponytail, her movements measured. She wasn't sure what this day would bring, but she knew it was important, not because Elliot Granger had hired her, but because a little girl had looked at her like she mattered. Harper sat at the table, legs dangling off the chair, watching her with the curious stillness only children mastered. There was no breakfast yet, no cartoons on the television, just the two of them, and the quiet kind of attention that meant something was starting to grow between them. Elena crouched in front of her. "Do you want to help me pick breakfast?" Harper hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. Room service arrived 10 minutes later. Pancakes, fruit, warm milk in a tiny porcelain cup. Elena cut Harper's pancakes into neat pieces, then slid the plate toward her. No pressure, no coaxing. Harper took the fork and began eating. Elliot walked in, just in time to see it. He didn't interrupt. He stood behind the island counter, arms crossed, watching as his daughter, who used to fight every bite, now sat beside a near stranger and ate like it was normal. Because maybe with Elena it was, they spent the morning exploring a small garden behind the hotel, quiet, mostly empty. Elena held Harper's hand as they walked the stone paths, pointing out koi fish in the pond and the small red umbrella that hung from a crooked bamboo hook. "She likes you," Elliot said, finally catching up to them. Elena looked back over her shoulder. "You say that like it's a surprise?" "It is." They sat down on a bench, near a tree shedding its leaves too early. Harper ran her fingers along the edge of a wooden sign, tracing the Japanese characters carefully. "She doesn't let people in easily." Elliot added, "She doesn't have to." Elena said she just needs someone to meet her where she is. Elliot looked at her. "You do that." Well, Elena didn't smile. She just nodded, eyes following Harper. "It's not a skill," she said, "it's memory." Later that afternoon, Elena sat cross-legged on the hotel floor, surrounded by colored pencils and half-crumpled sketch paper. Harper lay on her stomach, tongue between her teeth, drawing something in purple and orange. "Tell me about this one," Elena said, pointing to the lines that formed something like a bird, or maybe a dragon. Harper looked up. "It flies." "Where does it go?" "Anywhere." Elena smiled. "That's the best kind of flying." Behind them, Elliot leaned against the doorway holding his phone, but not using it. He'd canceled 2 meetings already. He didn't regret it. Watching them now, he felt something shift. Not guilt, not obligation, just presence. He'd spent years managing everything, fixing what could be fixed, outsourcing what couldn't. But he couldn't outsource this. He had to be in it that evening. Elena tucked Harper into bed again this time, without needing to be asked. She read 2 stories. Harper asked for a third. Elliot watched from the hallway, arms crossed. When Elena stepped out, he was waiting. She doesn't ask for things. Elena shrugged gently. She did tonight. He followed her to the lounge. "I don't know how you do it," he said. "I've been trying for 5 years to get close to her." "You're close," she replied. "Not like you are. That's because I'm not afraid of her sadness." "But you are," Elena stated, understanding his fear. Elliot turned to her, puzzled. "Why would I be afraid of my own daughter?" "Because she reminds you of what you lost," Elena said plainly. "And it's easier to stay busy than to sit in that feeling." The words hung heavy between them, undeniable. Quietly, Elliot asked, "What reminds you?" Elena gazed out at the city lights, then whispered, her silence. That night, the first crack appeared. Elliot sat alone in the living room, staring at the nameless city streets, holding a glass of water as if it were a stronger drink. He pulled out his phone and opened a folder of old videos. One from the hospital, years ago, showed his wife, her voice hoarse but beautiful with laughter, holding newborn Harper like a fragile miracle. Elliot younger, leaning in with careful hands. The light in his eyes then was real. He hadn't watched the clip in years, not since the funeral. He let it play halfway through. Harper stirred from the guest room, stepped quietly into the room, and climbed into his lap without a word. Elliot didn't speak either. He just held her, and for the first time, he didn't look away from the memory. The next morning began quietly. Harper had crawled into bed with her father sometime before sunrise. Elliot hadn't noticed until he woke up, her tiny form pressed against his side, her breathing even. He stayed still for a moment, unsure of what to do, until she stirred, blinked twice, and nestled closer. She hadn't done that since she was 3. He didn't move. He just lay there holding her, wondering if he deserved it. In the dining area, Alina was already up, sitting on the balcony with a cup of tea, legs pulled under her hair loose from the usual neat bun. She looked less like a flight attendant and more like someone trying to remember what peace felt like. When Elliot stepped outside, she didn't look surprised. "Coffee's inside," she said. "I didn't touch it. I don't speak fluent billionaire." Elliot smirked. "It's all startup jargon, an espresso." She gestured to the seat across from her sit. "Just don't bring your calendar." He sat. They were quiet for a while, the kind of silence that didn't feel like distance, just two people choosing stillness. Then Elliot said, "You're good with her." "I'm not good with many people," Alina replied. "The kids, they're different." "Why?" She took a breath, then sipped her tea. "When I was 9, I used to hide in the laundry closet at night. My mom would bring home different men. Most didn't notice me. One did." Elliot stiffened slightly. "She left. Not long after that, I ended up with my grandmother. She raised me like I was something precious, made me believe I was more than someone who'd been left." Alina's voice didn't crack. She didn't flinch, but she didn't look at him either. "I studied childhood development in college. I wanted to give other kids what I didn't have, a voice, a place. Then she died, and she stopped her hand, gripped the tea mug just a little tighter. I dropped out, packed my things, signed up for flight school, told myself that floating above everything was safer than landing anywhere too long." Elliot didn't interrupt when she finally looked at him. Her eyes were clear. "I didn't mean to tell you that. I'm glad you did," he said simply. Then Harper walked into the room in her pajamas, barefoot, bunny in hand. She looked between the two adults, then climbed onto Alina's lap without saying a word. Elliot watched as Alina gently shifted her arms to cradle the child. Harper reached for the tea mug. Alina instinctively pulled it back. "That's hot," she whispered. Harper leaned her head against Alina's shoulder and whispered something back. "You have sad eyes." Alina froze just for a second, then she exhaled, kissed the top of Harper's head, and whispered, "So do you." Later that day, they went to a small bookstore in Shibuya, 3 floors tucked between modern buildings and old lantern signs. Harper picked out a book with a soft blue cover. She held it tight, the whole walk back in the hotel. Alina offered to read it, and Harper agreed. No resistance, no negotiation. Halfway through the story, Harper interrupted. "She died," she said. Alina blinked. "In the story?" Harper shook her head. "My mommy." The air in the room shifted. Alina lowered the book slowly. Elliot was just outside the doorway. He heard it too. Harper looked down at the pages. "Daddy doesn't say her name." Alina's throat tightened. "Would you like to?" Harper nodded. "Her name was Claire." Alina smiled gently. "That's a beautiful name. Is she still in the sky?" Alina hesitated, then said softly, "I think she's somewhere she can still see you." Harper looked up. "Can she see you too?" Alina blinked. "Maybe." Harper nodded, then leaned into her again. That night, Elliot walked Alina to the elevator. She was heading to her own room for the first time since she'd agreed to help. "Thank you," he said, "for today, for everything." Alina shrugged. 3 days. "Remember, I'm not counting anymore." She smiled. "That's dangerous." Before she could turn away, he asked, "What did Harper say to you this morning?" Alina hesitated. She said, "I have sad eyes." Elliot nodded slowly. "She notices everything. She gets that from you." They stood there for a moment, something unfinished hanging between them. "Good night, Elliot," she said. "Alina." She turned back. "I'm sorry for what happened to you." Alina offered a soft smile. "I'm not," she said. It made me notice kids like Harper and fathers like you. The elevator doors opened. She stepped in, and this time, Elliot watched her go. The next morning began differently. Harper was already awake. When Elliot stepped out of the bedroom, she was sitting at the kitchen table, drawing quietly with a blue pencil. The bunny was by her side as always, but something in her posture had shifted. She was waiting for someone. Elliot poured himself a cup of coffee. "Alina will be here soon," he said gently. Harper didn't look up, but she nodded. He watched her for a moment, how she sat straighter, now more grounded. The change was subtle, but undeniable. Whatever Alina had touched in his daughter, it wasn't small. By mid-morning, they were all at a quiet riverside park on the edge of the city. It was the kind of place only locals knew. Wide stone walkways, pale soccer trees already shedding petals, and enough open space for a child to run without bumping into the world. Hulamy and Harper sat on a bench, coloring in a worn storybook. Elliot stood nearby, taking it in, like a man watching life happen outside a glass wall. But the glass was thinner. Now he joined them. A few minutes later, Harper looked up at him, then did something she hadn't done in months. She patted the space beside her. He sat Alina, passed him a crayon, half a joke, half an invitation. He smiled, took it, and began coloring alongside them. Later that afternoon, back at the hotel, Alina helped Harper change into pajamas. The bedtime routine had quietly become hers, unspoken, but expected. Tonight, as she tucked Harper in, the little girl pulled something from under her pillow. A photograph, worn corners bent, folded once, then flattened again. It was a picture of her mother, Claire, smiling in a hospital bed, holding a newborn Harper wrapped in a pale blanket. Elliot, younger but with eyes full of awe, stood beside them. Helena gently took the item, remarking on its beauty. Harper, pointing to herself, added, "I was born that day." Alina confirmed with a smile. "Yes, you were." The atmosphere grew still as Alina continued. "She died the next day." Harper looked up. "Daddy never talks about it, but I remember." Alina hesitated. "What do you remember?" Harper's finger traced her mother's face. "She smelled like flowers and she sang something before I slept, but I forgot the song." Her voice cracked. And then, for the first time since the funeral, Harper cried. It wasn't a loud, panicked wail, but the quiet, aching sobs of a child who had held something inside for too long. Alina didn't speak. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened her arms. Harper fell into them. Elliot, standing just outside the room, heard everything. He didn't walk in. He just stood there, hand pressed to the wall, and let his daughter grieve for the mother. Neither of them had dared to talk about. Later that night, the hotel suite was silent again. Elliot sat on the balcony alone. Alina joined him without needing to ask. She remembered more than I thought. He said quietly, "She's been waiting for permission to say it." Alina replied. He looked at her. Permission from whom? From you. That hit harder than he expected. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I thought protecting her meant not bringing it up. I didn't want her to relive it. Grief doesn't wait for a parent to open the door. Alina said it finds its way through. Eventually, they were quiet for a moment. Then Elliot turned to her. Did you have someone like that? Someone who held space for your grief? Alina didn't answer right away. My grandmother, she said eventually, but by the time I needed her most, she was already gone. Elliot exhaled. I'm sorry. Alina nodded. Me too. The door opens the next day. While Elliot was out for a brief meeting, Alina took Harper to a local cultural center. There was a small music room, mostly used for children's classes, with soft floor mats and a woman playing simple melodies on a small piano. Harper stood by the door at first watching. Then she stepped inside. Then she sang. It wasn't loud, just a few hums off top a native, but Alina recognized it. It was You or My Sunshine. Harper looked up at her. That was the song. Alina knelt beside her, blinking away the sting in her eyes. How do you know that song? Harper asked. Alina smiled. Someone I loved used to sing it to me. Harper reached for her hand. We can sing it together. And they did, right there in a quiet room in a Tokyo center. Neither of them had known existed the day before. They sang, one voice small, the other steady. Elliot returned an hour later to find Harper asleep on Alina's shoulder, music sheet still clutched in her hand. Something in him cracked. Not pain, not grief. Something else. Something like belief. The sky over Tokyo was bruised with clouds that evening. A soft gray stretching across the city like a curtain drawn halfway closed. Inside the hotel suite, warm light spilled across the living room. Carpet Harpers sat cross-legged on the floor, humming softly as she colored. Alina sat beside her, helping shade in the wings of a bird. Does it fly high? I. Alina asked. Harper nodded, very high like mommy. Alina paused. That's a good place to fly. Elliot watched from the kitchen island, coffee in hand. The ease between them, Harper's quiet comfort, the way Alina responded without overreaching. It felt natural. Now familiar, something he didn't know how to name. He wanted to say something, but before he could, Harper turned to him and asked, "Can Miss Alina stay for dinner?" Elliot looked at Alina. She hesitated, then nodded. "If it's okay with your dad." Harper grinned and returned to her drawing. Elliot just smiled. "It's more than okay." Later that evening, they ate noodles and dumplings from a small place Alina had found, tucked between two convenience stores. It wasn't elegant, but it was real, and Harper ate 2 full dumplings without being prompted. When dinner was over and Harper was tucked into bed, Elliot stepped out onto the balcony. The air was cooler. Now he leaned against the railing, watching the city blur into lights. Alina joined him, a moment later, wrapping her arms around herself. "She's come alive," Elliot said, still staring out. Alina nodded. She was always alive. She just needed someone to see her. He turned to face her. So did I. Alina's eyes flickered. Something had changed between them. The space that once felt formal now hummed with something unsaid. Not romantic tension. Not yet. But the beginnings of connection. "You've changed too," she said. Elliot didn't deny it. "She made me want to show up," he said. "But you reminded me how their eyes met." It could have been a moment, but Alina stepped back. The next morning she was gone. A note on the kitchen counter. Simple, clean, no emotion. "Thank you for letting me be part of her story, but I wasn't meant to stay." Alina. Elliot read it 3 times. Then he walked into Harper's room. She was sitting up in bed, hugging her bunny tight. "She's not here," she said quietly. Elliot sat beside her. "No. Did she say goodbye?" Elliot shook his head. "Not to me." Harper turned her face into his arm. Why do people leave? He didn't have an answer, because part of him wanted to chase Alina, and part of him understood exactly why she ran. Meanwhile, Alina, she sat in a quiet corner of Narita Airport, boarding pass in hand. She wasn't supposed to let it go that far. She had rules for herself: show up, help disappear. No roots, no expectations. But Harper had reached in and cracked something open. And Elliot, he made her feel seen too much, too soon. She couldn't lose another person. She couldn't let herself believe she belonged, only to be left behind. So she left first. That night, Elliot's hotel suite, Harper refused to eat. She wouldn't speak, wouldn't watch TV, wouldn't color. She just stared out the window, with the drawing still clutched in her lap. Elliot sat with her, held her hand, waited. He knew this feeling too well, and he knew for the first time that he was tired of waiting for people to come back if he wanted this. He had to fight for Alina if he truly wanted her to be more than a fleeting moment. The suite felt emptier without her, too quiet and still. Elliot stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the clouds roll over Tokyo like an incoming tide, pulling everything inward. He hadn't turned on the news or touched his laptop. Nearby, Harper sat on the rug with her bunny in her lap, tracing a crayon around a drawing. She didn't finish. She left. Harper said softly. Elliot didn't answer immediately. He crouched beside her. She didn't mean to hurt you. She didn't say goodbye. Elliot swallowed the ache in his throat. Sometimes people leave because they're afraid. Harper looked up. Afraid of what? of being loved back. The words left his mouth before he fully understood them. But once they were out, he knew they were true. Harper leaned into him. "They're not leaving too, right?" "No," he said quietly. "I'm not." And then for the first time since Alina left, he made a decision, not from fear, not from strategy, from heart. That afternoon, Narita Airport, Alina sat at gate 47 boarding pass, tucked into her passport, coffee cooling beside her. She'd turned off her phone. She didn't want to know if Elliot had tried to call. It was easier this way, cleaner. No attachments, but the ache in her chest told another story. Her flight was delayed. Of course it was. Elliot arrived at the airport without a plan. He didn't send his assistant, he didn't call ahead. He just asked himself if I were scared of being loved, where would I run? And somehow that led him here. He moved through the terminal with purpose, scanning faces, past the cafes, past the crowd at international departures. And then he saw her. She was sitting by herself, staring out at the runway. Her shoulders slightly tense, her expression unreadable, but he could read it because he wore that same look for years. The reunion, Alina, she turned. He was there. No coat, no entourage, just him, real, unpolished, honest. "What are you doing here?" she asked, stunned. "I didn't come to change your mind." He said, "I came to tell you that you changed mine." She blinked. "I've spent years showing up in the wrong ways, paying for the best." When all Harper needed was someone who would sit on the floor and listen, Alina's lips parted, but no words came out. "You didn't just help her." He continued. "You helped me. You made me see her. You made me see myself." He stepped closer. "But if you walk away now, if you go back to floating through cities and hiding behind seat numbers, I get it. I've done it too." He held her gaze. "But I think you want more. And I know I do." Silence. Then her voice cracked barely above a whisper. "I wasn't supposed to fall in love with her. Elliot nodded me either." Tears slipped down her cheek. He reached out not to pull her, but to steady her. She led him. Then behind him, Miss Angel, they both turned. Harper stood there. Small backpack in hand, running across the terminal, her bunny dragging behind her. "I asked Daddy to find you," she said, breathless, "because I didn't get to say goodbye." Alina crouched as Harper threw her arms around her neck. "I don't want to fly without you," Harper whispered. Alina closed her eyes, hugging her tightly. And that was it. The goodbye. She didn't give the hello. She didn't expect. Later, back at the suite, Alina unpacked the same bag she'd packed the day before. This time there was no expiration date. No deal, no promise of just a few days. Harper lay curled in her bed, Bunny tucked beside her, and Elliot stood in the doorway watching Alina smooth the blankets. "She's asleep," she whispered. He nodded. Helena looked at him. "I don't know how to do this, neither do I," he said. "But maybe we figure it out together." She looked at him for a long beat. Then quietly she nodded. And for the first time, Elliot crossed the room, not to supervise, not to protect, but to stay. The sun spilled into the suite in wide golden strokes. For the first time since their arrival in Tokyo, the morning felt unhurried, uncomplicated. Alina stood barefoot in the kitchen, tying her hair back with one hand, while flipping pancakes with the other. She hadn't made breakfast for someone else in years. And never like this. Never with the quiet hum of a child singing off-key. In the next room, Harper danced around the coffee table, Bunny in one hand, her blue crayon in the other, drawing invisible circles in the air. Elliot watched from the hallway, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, not as a billionaire, not as a provider, but as a man, slowly remembering how to be part of something simple and alive. He stepped into the kitchen. "You're making her favorite. She told me pancakes taste better when you flip them before the song ends." "What song?" Alina grinned. "She's making it up as she goes." Elliot smiled, then reached into the cabinet and pulled out 2 mugs. "I can handle coffee." She looked at him. "Progress. Baby steps." Later that morning, in the hotel courtyard, Alina sat on a bench with Harper nestled beside her. a picture book resting open on both their laps. Elliot joined them after a call, slipping his phone into his pocket like it was no longer the center of his world. Harper pointed to a drawing of a lion and whispered, "Daddy's." This one. Elliot raised a brow. "Why a lion?" "Because you're strong, but you don't roar at me." Alina blinked. Elliot looked down, visibly moved. "Thanks, kiddo," he said, voice low. Then Harper added, "And Miss Alina is the bird." Alina smiled. "What kind of bird?" "A sky bird. The kind that never lands unless it finds the right place." Elliot and Alina exchanged a glance. Harper kept reading, unaware. She just described them both better than they ever could. That afternoon, a quiet moment. Elliot and Alina stood by the large window in the hotel suite while Harper napped. The city stretched out beneath them. Rivers of steel and neon. Alina septint. Elliot studied her. "You look different." "Jet lag," she joked. He shook his head. "No, you're lighter, like you're letting yourself be here." She didn't answer right away. "I've always kept my life in transit." She said that way when people leave, it hurts less. "But you came back." Alina looked at him, "Only because someone 5 years old asked me to." Elliot stepped closer. "I'm glad she did." The air shifted. He could have kissed her. He almost did, but Alina turned away first. Not out of rejection, but because something in her wasn't quite ready. Not yet. The call that changes everything. That night, Elliot's phone rang. He almost didn't answer. But when he saw the name on the screen, Charles Whitmore, his company's board chairman, he excused himself and stepped out onto the balcony. The call wasn't long, but when it ended, Elliot stood in the cold wind. For a long time, inside Alina was brushing Harper's hair, humming something gentle. When Elliot came back in, his expression was different. "Is everything okay?" Alina asked. He nodded too quickly. "Yes, just logistics. We might have to cut the trip short." "For how long?" Elliot hesitated. "I'll figure it out." Alina didn't push, but she felt it. The shift, that quiet pull of gravity, trying to drag something beautiful back to earth. Later that night, alone, in the lounge, Alina sat curled on the couch, the television on mute. Elliot joined her after Harper fell asleep. "Talk to me," she said. He rubbed his hands together. "That call was about a deal I've been working on for months. They want me back in San Francisco tomorrow." Alina nodded. "So go." He looked at her. "You could come with us." She didn't speak just for a while. He added, "I don't want this to end just because the city changes." Alina exhaled slowly. "I came back because of Harper, but I stayed because something in this started to feel possible." "It is." He said, "It still is." Alina shook her head gently. "I believe you mean that, but do you understand what it means to choose it every day when things aren't simple? When you're not on vacation from grief?" Elliot's voice was quiet. "I want to try." Alina looked up. "Trying isn't the same as staying." He stepped back as if the weight of the words took space to process. "I'll book you a seat on the jet," he said finally. "You don't have to decide tonight." Alina nodded, but she already knew this wasn't just about geography. It was about whether the life she was building could survive. Once real life returned, the jet touched down just after midnight. San Francisco glowed beneath them. Familiar and indifferent city, lights stretched like nerves across the hills, pulsing with the rhythm of lives moving faster than feelings could catch up. Harper slept soundly through the landing, her chest gently rising and falling under a soft fleece blanket. Her bunny tucked beside her. A few seats away, Alina was wide awake, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. She had agreed to come, yet a part of her remained in Tokyo, folded quietly within an inexplicable moment. The house was larger than Alina had imagined, not just in size, but in its profound silence. Marble floors, high ceilings, and clean lines created a space built for appearances, not memories. It echoed, Elliot noticed. "I know it's not warm," he said, setting down Harper's suitcase. "I had a decorator, not a heart." Alina looked around. She'll need color, light, something soft. He nodded. Then we change it. Harper wandered in behind them, rubbing her eyes. Is this home? Elliot crouched. Only if you want it to be. Harper looked up at Alina, who smiled gently. We'll make it feel that way. The next week passed in quiet contrast. Elliot returned to the office. Longer hours, boardroom tension, investor calls. Alina and Harper stayed back. Walks in the garden. Story time under the kitchen. Skylight pancakes on Tuesdays because routine mattered. Harper adjusted slowly but beautifully. Alina struggled, not with Harper but with everything else. The house felt borrowed, the space too. Clean, the distance between Elliot and the life they'd shared in Tokyo too wide. Every evening he came home later. Every conversation felt shorter. She told herself not to mind, but she did, the whisper of doubt. One evening after Harper had gone to bed, Alina stood on the balcony alone. Elliot stepped out beside her, loosened his tie, and leaned on the railing. I had to fire a VP today, he said, 12 years with the company. But he made a call that cost us millions. Alina nodded. That sounds like a hard day. He exhaled, part of the job. There was silence between them. Then he looked at her. You're quiet. Alina hesitated, then said, Do you notice how different it feels here? Elliot frowned. You mean the city? I mean you. He turned. What do you mean you don't look at me the same way? That's not true. Maybe not, she said. But here you are, the man the world knows out there in the sky, in Tokyo. You are the man your daughter needed. Elliot stepped forward. You think those can't be the same? I think they're not. Not yet. That night, Alina packed a small bag, just one. She didn't leave, but she needed the gesture to remind herself she could. Elliot found her sitting in the guest room the next morning, staring at it. You're leaving. No, she said, but I'm afraid I'm disappearing. He didn't speak, so she continued. I didn't come here to be a pause in your story. I came because it felt like maybe I was becoming part of one. You are. Then show me. It wasn't a challenge. It was a request. Not for flowers, not for promises, for presence. The next evening, the breaking point, Harper refused to eat. When Alina asked why, she whispered, Because I want us to go back where? To the place you were happy. Alina blinked, stunned. Elliot, standing nearby, froze. Harper looked at both of them. You're not smiling anymore. That night, Elliot walked into Alina's room with a small box in his hand. She was reading. He said nothing, just handed it to her. Inside, a folded drawing, Harper's crayon sketch of the three of them. Hand in hand, under clouds, a sun with a smile beneath it. 3 words. In a child's handwriting, you are home. Alina's breath caught. She drew it for you, Elliot said. But I think she drew it for us. He took a step closer. You asked me to show you. He reached into his pocket again, this time with a key. This house has 15 rooms, he said, but it's empty without you, without her laughter, without what we became. He held out the tea stay, not as a guest, not as a helper, but his family. Alina looked up, tears brimming, but this time not from fear, from recognition, from hope, from the first real belief that she might finally belong. The morning after the drawing, Alina didn't open the box again. She didn't need to. It was in her mind the moment she woke, Harper's handwriting, the way her little fingers had pressed too hard on the crayon, as if hoping to leave more than color, as if trying to leave proof you are home. Alina made pancakes that morning, burnt the first one. Harper laughed. Elliot joined them halfway through. No phone, no laptop, just a quiet nod and a grateful plate in front of him. No one said much, but the silence had changed. This one was warm. Later that day, Harper was in the backyard chasing bubbles. In the sunlight, Elliot sat beside Alina on the back steps. His hands were still for once. I've had a lot of meetings, he said, eyes forward. A lot of decisions. This one scares me the most. Alina glanced over. He met her gaze because it's not about risk or leverage. It's about whether I'm brave enough to give Harper the family she deserves. Elena didn't answer. She just laid her hand over his. That was enough. The unexpected call. The phone rang that night. Elliot hesitated, then picked up on the other end. Charles Wyndham, chairman of the board, father of Elliot's late wife. I heard you restructuring, Charles said, coldly, selling stakes. Shifting control. Elliot leaned back. That's right. You'll lose influence, and eventually ownership. I already lost. What mattered most once, Charles? I'm not doing it again. You mean the girl? No, Elliot said, voice firm. I mean the woman who saved her. There was silence. Then Charles added, don't forget whose name is still on the foundation papers. Elliot stared out the window. I'm building a new foundation. Click. Alina heard part of the call. She didn't ask, but Elliot came to her. Anyway, later that evening, he found her sitting at the edge of Harper's bed, brushing her hair back with a tenderness that said, I was never meant to leave. He waited until she looked at him. Charles might try to freeze assets. He said he might fight the changes I'm making. Alina stayed still because of me, because I stopped playing by his rules. Alina looked down at Harper, sleeping between them. Will you regret it? Elliot shook his head. Not a single thing. The next morning, a new flight. They boarded a short private flight, not luxurious, just necessary. Harper held both their hands. She wore her backpack with the bunny ears and a big smile. Alina asked where they were going. Elliot smiled. Somewhere you've never been, but you already belong. The plane lifted, and so did the weight. It was a grand, just a garden close, friends. A breeze that made the candles flicker. Alina wore a simple dress, elegant, not expensive. Harper carried the rings. Elliot looked different that day. Not younger, not richer, just real. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Harper loudly whispered, Don't you dare. Everyone laughed. Alina's hands shook as she said, yes. But not from fear, from knowing this wasn't a rescue. This was a return. No longer driven by loss, but by the promise of what could be. Alina stood at an airport gate months later. This time, she was on the other side. Her uniform crisp, wings pinned to her chest. Harper waved goodbye as Alina prepared for a short flight. Elliot kissed her temple, assuring her, We'll be here when you land. She smiled. I know. As she passed through the gate, she looked back just once at the man who had seen her feeding a child and in turn offered her a world. He waved, but did not say goodbye, because finally, nothing was leaving. Everything was arriving. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If it moved, inspired, or simply made you feel something real, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, emotional stories daily, and the next one might just change your life. See you in the next video.